So by the time you see this video, I will be in Romania and we'll be in the middle of traveling to 6 different cities across that country. It's always an adventure, and I always feel a little bit of anxiety before a big long trip. This will be almost 2 weeks that I'll be gone. And I think the reason is because you're going to a completely different culture. You're dealing with a different language. You're dealing with people who have a very dramatically different history than your own. And in Romania, they've had war. They've had forced dramatic abortion levels. Almost 75% of all pregnancies in Romania ended in abortion back in the early 90s. Very traumatic experiences. Things have improved much. The church is vital there. And but one of the questions I always ask is, where's your source of strength? Where's your source of endurance? Where's your source of courage when you need it? Where do you get the ability to take certain risks? And one of the answers to that question is found in the book of 2 Corinthians. Paul was a great missionary. He was always traveling. He was always taking risks. He was always a man of great courage and boldness in sharing the good news. And he writes in 2 Corinthians chapter 2, "But thanks be to God, who in Christ always leads us in triumphal procession, and through us spreads the fragrance of the knowledge of him everywhere. For we are the aroma of Christ to God among those who are being saved, and among those who are perishing. To one a fragrance from death to death, and to the other a fragrance from life to life." Meaning that Paul understood that people would respond to his work in 2 different ways. One would be repelled, and one would be drawn. One sees the good news of the Lordship of Jesus Christ as a deadly curse, God telling me how to live my own life when I want to live it on my own terms. And the other, an attractive aroma of life, of this is how God designed me, this is what I'm made for. I'm made to know him, to walk in his ways, to know his redemptive power, his guiding grace in my life, and to draw me all the way to himself. And this is the good news. Paul saw this power that God would always lead him in triumphal procession, meaning that no matter what hardships he went through, whatever risks he had to take, whatever sufferings he had to endure, God was going to use all of that in the same way that God uses the cross to bring about victory. And that for me is the great source in my own life, is to just believe that whatever sufferings we must endure, if we must, in carrying out the great work of the gospel, they're the sufferings that advance our work rather than limit it. In Paul's case, here's some of the things that he was dealing with in spite of the fact that he felt that he would be triumphant and victorious. He writes in the same letter, "We do not want you to be unaware, brothers, of the affliction we experienced in Asia. For we were so utterly burdened beyond our strength that we despaired of life itself." Now, that is a low point emotionally, when you're despairing of life itself. In other words, there are moments in Paul's life where he did not think he was going to survive because of the dangers and the risks that he was taking. "For we were so utterly burdened beyond our strength that we despaired of life itself. Indeed, we felt that we had received a sentence of death. But that was to make us rely not on ourselves, but on God who raises the dead. He delivered us from such deadly peril, and he will continue to deliver us." In other words, the source of Paul's strength in carrying out hard and difficult things was his confidence that God was leading him triumphantly. And he interpreted all of the blowback, the hardships, the opposition, the arrest, the beatings, everything that he had to endure as God making him not relying on his education, on his authority, on his experience, but on God himself. And so that's what we're trying to do as well. We all need to carry out the good works that God has called us to do. But God has his way through the cross-bearing nature of the work to make us more and more dependent on him, so that when he works, we see him as the workman of the mission, and he receives the glory for it and not ourselves. It's a delicate balance to be triumphant and to be realistic about the hardships that we face. But this is where I find a great source of strength to take risks, to endure hardships, is because we have a faith in which God uses the cross-bearing nature of our work as a Christ-exalting source of power and victory. Thank you.